Hello, everyone. Welcome to Beyond the Ordinary, where today we are going to be introducing you and interviewing Katie Paige. She is an amazing investigator and storyteller of all things UFO and the paranormal and unexplained. So stay tuned.
Welcome to Beyond the Ordinary.
Thank
Welcome,
you
Katie.
thank you all so much for having me here. This is going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah. So we just want to get to know you better and all of your experiences. And I'm just so thrilled. I believe you were on Paranormal Among Us with Paranormal Paul before. You've had an interview with him some time ago, I believe. So I watched that. I was so super excited to see that. And so Katie, just tell us a little bit about you and your background.
Yeah, so for me, I in the mid 70s, giving away my age a little bit, but as a young girl, my mom dated a gentleman. She worked for United Airlines. She was a computer operator in the Denver Tech Center. Started dating a gentleman who purchased a 60-acre ranch property out in Elbert County. And this is where Linda Moulton Howe got her start with this rash of animal mutilations out there. And it's a very high strange. It's very similar actually to the Skinwalker Ranch. In fact, the activity out in Elbert County predated the Skinwalker Ranch. So my family and I, my sister, my mom, all had really strange activity out there, and it ran the gamut from UFOs to cryptids to the military presence, Black Access Project. So as many of us do, you go through life, you're working a job, you're raising a family, but those questions never really left me. And when I was a kid, we were threatened and warned never to talk about what was happening out there on that ranch property. So I never knew it was investigated. I never knew anybody knew anything about it at all until I purchased this book right here, Hunt for the Skinwalker. And at the
Wow.
time, this was before this was a TV show or anything. I just read the back of the book and I went, wow, it really sounds a lot like what I went through as a young girl out on this ranch. And come to find out, there's 9 pages in a chapter in here called Other Hotspots talking about the Colorado Ranch. So
Oh,
I was
wow.
just dumbfounded. I was like in shock for a couple hours. I call my mom, I call my sister. I'm like, you're not going to believe this. Not only did other people know about it, but there were 3 PhDs that were investigating the property. Dr. Leo Sprinkle, PhD out of Laramie, Wyoming, Peter Van Arsdale, who was a seismologist, and John Durr, PhD. And so APRO, which is the Aerial Phenomenon Research Organization, researched this and investigated this land. So that's where it all started for me. And it's been 15 plus years now of going down all because there's so many things that happened and are still happening out there that it's led me down, from the UFOs to the cryptids to the paranormal hitchhiker stuff. There's just so much that this high strange location covers. And then, of course, I was lucky enough to film with Beyond Skinwalker for 3 seasons. So that was cool too.
That's really cool.
Yeah. Good. I have a quick question, if I may, Katie. So I've been to the area of the Skinwalker Ranch with Ryan Skinner, who,
Mhm.
who and did some research with him. I'm sure you probably know him.
Yeah.
Now, when I was there was an extraordinary encounter where a guy who was an army psychiatrist, I'm not going to name his name because he saw these dark shadow figures walking around our vehicle as we came back to it in the middle of the night. Why do you think these things, for want of a better word, this I know it's in a more, why do you think these things are attracted to particular spots? What is it about these spots that draws things in?
Yeah, it's a wonderful question. And one of the very first questions I had years ago, I'm like, okay, that we have these high strangeness hotspots, and even in the UK, and around the world, what do they have in common? So I really started looking into that. And one thing, 90% plus, there's a couple that fall off this, but 90% of these locations ping the charts at being highly magnetic. So if you go to the magnetic anomaly map. You can search these locations and see, and the lightest shade of pink is highly magnetic. So Skinwalker, Sedona, this whole Sedona area of Arizona, Bradshaw Ranch and Marley Woods and the Elbert County Ranch in Colorado are all highly magnetic. And the other feature they all have in common is they have water, whether it's aquifers. And right where the ranch in my childhood sits, we have two major aquifers that actually come together. So the water tables are different. So maybe perhaps some of these cryptids that we're seeing or some of this activity maybe it has to do with the aquifers or tunneling or caverns or caves underground. And then they have really similar geological aspects as well, whether it's limestone, granite, even in the Great Sand Dunes, with the Snippy the Horse case, which has so much more to it too. But, the Great Sand Dunes is crystals. So you add these elements together, and it seems to either allow us to interact with the phenomenon more, we're able to see it, maybe whatever this is attracted there. And we don't know what we're dealing with, whether these are ETs or spirits or we don't know, but whatever it is we're dealing with, it seems like these three ingredients are key pieces of the high strangeness stuff.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's incredible. So tell us a little bit about growing up in this area. Like, what did you see and what did you experience that was the most
Yeah,
phenomenal?
what's fascinating to me, and what I want to make clear for everybody who's viewing this or listening, is that I did not live there full time. So this, my mom dated the gentleman, and the boy's mother and her new boyfriend lived on the ranch. So we were bringing the boys, his two youngest sons, back and forth. We lived 45 minutes away, and
Mhm.
what's interesting about that is. This was before anybody knew anything about the hitchhiker phenomenon. So at my home, 45 minutes away, I was experiencing that as a 9, 10, and 11-year-old girl, having these large shadow figures by my bed. Always slept with Big Sister, a very
Wow.
paranormal active house. And I never correlated it to the ranch until fast forward decades later, when we're starting to see that this is a real common occurrence. And it was even reported that the investigators at Skinwalker Ranch, their wives would be home back east and their husbands would be investigating the ranch in Utah, and the wives were experiencing hitchhiker phenomenon back east. So
Hmm.
how that works and why that is, I do not
That's
know. But now looking back all these years later, I'm like, oh, I think there was something to that. And even, going back to the ranch, I actually just stayed there this last weekend. But I feel like whatever there remembers, or maybe we talk about the Native Americans and the folklore with the Cherokee, the Pawnee, the Comanche, the Ute, and all the battles and horrific things that have been seen there. Does the land remember, or the spirits remember, and they attach themselves to certain souls or certain energies? And it sure feels that way for me. So I just wanted to make that clear. Even though my sister and my mother and I all experienced some really terrifying things at the ranch property, we did not live there full time. And I'm so thankful for that because
yeah,
the boys that did, they all moved out of Colorado. They're like, we are moving on with our lives. And I think it's that distance that I have that has allowed me to actually do a deep dive on this stuff. Otherwise, I'd probably be too traumatized to even look at it.
Just one
absolutely.
question, if I may, about these shadow creatures, um, and it's this, because they fascinated me, and we had that hand encounter. Normally, in the paranormal world, when you see shadow creatures or shadow spirits, I know Natalie's seen one, for example, and
Mhm.
while you were talking, that rung a bell with me. They're not necessarily normally a good thing, you know. I know people who experienced them in Iraq after they'd had combat, for example. Are they different, the ones that you're experiencing, to the what I consider fairly insidious shadow creatures that we normally experience in paranormal phenomena?
Yeah, that's a good question. And, it's hard to know who or what we're dealing with when it comes to shadow entities or ghosts or spirits. I know that, having lost loved ones in my life and having that kind of paranormal activity when you're encountering a ghost or a spirit of that nature that could be grandma or mother or somebody who's close to you has passed is quite different than these large shadow beings that typically, in my experience, I always saw in pairs of two or three, and they're dark and kind of foreboding. Something that I really looked at with that, and something that has been studied for many, many years, is this fact of are these negative entities? Are they dark? Are they demonic? And certainly, while cameras are rolling, there was some nefarious things that were going on, kind of occult practices on this property years ago. Wasn't me, but there was some things found in the woods and back of the ranch that could have opened up some negative things. So lucky for me, having friends, the ex-Navajo Rangers, they've walked me through some ways to protect myself and to kind of surround yourself with that positive energy. But yes, we have a tendency to, just because it's dark, tall, and shadowy, ooh, that's scary and negative. Now, it might be, it might not be. I'm not sure. I certainly I had a radiation burn on my shoulder, but besides that, I don't feel like I've ever been attacked or anything negative. In fact, it feels quite the opposite for me. I feel somewhat protected and guided. And you hear that with a lot of experiencers that once started out as a scary kind of thing because they're not understanding what they're dealing with, turns into a very spiritual awakening. So I don't know exactly how to answer that other than I think we should be really careful about assigning just because something's dark and shadowy doesn't necessarily mean it's negative. Um, but I don't know either. So just be careful. And I think the message would be to always just kind of go in there with the best intentions and the best love and light and that kind of thing. And I think that'll help kind of keep that energy at least around yourselves good and positive. At least I try to do that the best I can. But that's not to say I haven't been scared, because I have. I certainly wouldn't go into the woods at night by myself, but that's more the cryptids than it is the dark shadows.
I have a question for Katie, if I
Yeah.
could. Hi, Katie. I'm Melissa. We're Facebook friends, and I've never
I
actually
know, I
met you
saw
in
that.
person. So it's nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Um, I We just had some really intense experiences when we were filming in the LBL very recently, and so there was at least one thing that we experienced together that kind of shook me personally. It was like next level experience. I'm just curious, with all of the research and things that you've done, was there something that happened or something that you experienced that really just took it next level for you?
For sure, absolutely. The scariest night on the ranch was next level. That being said, I am still questioning what that was, because what happened was it was the boys' mother's birthday. So even though it's a weird situation, it was the 70s. My mom was dating the gentleman named Jack, and I feel okay given the real names now because they're all passed away now, including my mother. So my mom was dating a gentleman named by the name of Jack, who was supposed to be getting divorced from Betty. They never ended up getting divorced. Like they ended up living their whole lives together. But at the time, Betty was dating a guy named John. So it was Betty and John and my mom and Jack, and they were cordial. So we were all hanging out. The boys were there. It was on the ranch. It was after midnight. It was pretty late at night. The adults are listening to music, playing board games. Me, my sister, and the three boys were hanging out in the bedroom. And every time this hum sound, that was the first thing that was reported out at the ranch, and they're still happening to this day. It's kind of like the Taos hum. It's this low, it's like a and so whenever you start hearing this hum, things would act up, whether it's orbs or shadow figures or cryptid sightings. So the hum started, and everybody's like, okay, what's going to happen? At that time, all the power in the house goes out. Radio shut down. We're all like, oh my gosh, flashlights. At that time, it was like the brightest light I've ever seen in my life shines through the boys' window. Okay.
Wow.
It was like daylight out there. So all this is going on. And at that very moment, this like disembodied electrical sounding voice went through like every orifice of the house. And I know what it says because of this. And when I read this to my mom and my sister, so this is the original briefing document done on the ranch property. Okay. And in this report was that account and what the voice said. It said, "Attention, we have allowed you to remain. We have interfered with your lives very little. Do not cause us to take action which you will regret. Your friends will be instructed to remain silent concerning us." So that was
Wow.
terrifying enough. Yeah, that was terrifying enough. So me and my mom, my sister, we get in our car and we make the 45-minute drive back to our house in Englewood. And I remember walking through the front door. I fall to the floor. I couldn't speak. I was like paralyzed, got the tunnel vision, got the full blown migraine headache. And I feel like whatever happened that night, it was like that was the pivotal point where whatever has affected my life ever since, it started then. And so, yeah, that was really terrifying. That being said, now I've learned of something called plasma ball technology. So the ranch actually sits really close to like NORAD, the Air Force Academy. We know there was Black Access military projects. In fact, John Duke, the gentleman that owned, part of this ranch, he claimed to be part of Air Defense Command from out of San Francisco. Some MK Ultra stuff was going on there. Talked about legal LSD kind of things happening. So there's all these little clues happening that kind of ties into the ranch. So was that disembodied electrical voice some sort of Black Access military project? Could have been, but it was still terrifying because we didn't know that at the time. I still don't know this to this day, but talk about, people, and that might be why we don't see a lot of disclosure happening, because this was happening to hundreds, if not thousands of people that were kind of unwitting like experiments for these Black Access projects that were going on, people in, state hospitals, things like that. We know for a fact they were conducting these kind of experiments. So were we kind of like players in that? I don't know, but it was terrifying. That was really, really scary.
Yeah, that is very next level. That
Yeah.
that trumps our experience.
Yeah.
I don't know about
that.
So you had mentioned about getting a burn
Mm.
on your arm. Can you explain that?
It was actually on my shoulder. So the very first, it was really interesting. So, as things started unfolding and I wanted to make contact with the people that, it was my mom's boyfriend that owned the ranch, and then it sat vacant for a number of years, and then another family owned it. Well, I didn't know if they knew about all the history of their property, and I certainly wasn't going to just text them or call them on the phone and lay all this stuff on them, right? So I left a note in the little box. I said, "I would love to be able to talk to you. I spent time on your property. I'm really curious if you know the history of where you live." And then COVID hit, and COVID shut us all down. Next thing you know, I'm getting a call from the History Channel. And they said, "When you meet this family, I want cameras rolling." So that very first season one, that episode where you see me pulling up in my Jeep, that was my first time back. No Hollywood tricks or anything. That was it. And so I'm meeting the family for the first time, trying to get my bearings and all that stuff. And that's when I found out about the nefarious things. But um what, sorry, what was the
No,
question?
that
Burn.
was the burn.
Oh yeah, the
on
burn.
your arm.
That first night, right. So we were expecting snow, and we got a big blizzard, and you could see it on the episode. And what a lot of people don't understand was there's these strange, mysterious boxes that I didn't talk about for years and years because it just sounds so nuts. But I was walking the film crew in the dark into the back of the woods to show them where I had this box experience. Go over the barbed wire. That's where we saw the cryptid prints. It was like a blanket of snow. These bipedal prints come out, they disappeared, they come out, they disappeared again. Looks to me like some sort of Sasquatch, Bigfoot creature. Maybe was just curious, like, why are these people back here with lights and cameras in the middle of the night? Anyway, it was the next day we had off of filming, and my daughter Jenna came down because I was unprepared for the blizzard, and I'm like, let's go to the outlet mall to the Columbia store and get some long johns and some hats and some gloves. And we were sitting at a restaurant having lunch, and my back was just like, what's going on? So we go back to the hotel room, and my daughter looks, and it looks like a handprint with 3 claws on it. It was hot to the touch. It blistered. It was all, I have all the pictures. So I called the producer right away and I'm like, I don't know how this happened. I don't know when it happened, how it happened. Cause I was literally wearing a sweater, a vest, another jacket, I had layers of clothes on because it was so cold. I never fell back. I never leaned against anything. I have no idea, but from the looks of it and from what people have said that have seen, the photos and all the videos, I had my daughter videotape it. Looks like a radiation burn, but it is like the shape of uh like this on
Mm-hmm.
my shoulder. I don't know. And then, fast forward to, I believe it was season 2 or season 3 when I had the landing site incident too, which was also scary. And come to find out, my big sister, Chris, was having the same thing, but she didn't want to speak up about it. Her phone went completely drained. That's the other thing with these TV shows. You film for a whole week for a 44-minute episode, and they have to kind of follow the Skinwalker Ranch kind of story. So the boxes they never touched on. And same with like certain things that I think would make the episode doesn't make the episode. For example, on the landing site where that strange snowless circle was when I was a kid, and I think there's something underground there. But Hillary had just put brand new batteries in all of our microphones for filming that shot. And while I'm standing there, and I was excited, I was looking forward to, doing whatever experiment we were going to do that night. Um, and it felt like 10,000 knives coming down on my shoulder. My blood pressure spiked up. Just couldn't stop shaking. But my battery, Hillary said my battery went from 100% to 50. Then Paul walks me right back to the barn. It went from 50 to nothing. Everybody else's battery stayed at 100%. My sister's phone died. So something is happening there, and I don't know what is attacking me specifically or why. And I'll tell you, it took me some convincing to get my sister to go back, because where I had the hitchhiker phenomena, my sister she hasn't. And she's like, I don't want to go back to the ranch and deal with the crap you've been dealing with like for your whole life. And I'm like, well, I'll just come because, when we're older, we can talk about, remember the time. And so she did, but it was something she was uncomfortable doing because she didn't want the hitchhiker stuff either. So, and she's still uncomfortable about it a little bit. So,
So what motivates you, Katie? I mean, this, because there's obviously elements of personal danger here. You've just been telling us
yeah,
about the burns you suffer. Obviously, your family must be worried. Why'd you do it?
because I want answers and I'm stubborn and I have a big head. Um, I don't know. I am more cautious. Like I said, I just spent the night out there and I was a little like, but I got through. Nothing happened. We had some hits on the K2 and the tri-field meter. So there was some sort of spirit or energy there that we were interacting with. Again, I don't know what we were interacting with. I just know the equipment was responding. But I didn't have any burns or any scratches or any marks. So that's good. And maybe part of me feels like whatever this is, because you have to remember, I've kind of dealt with this since I was a young girl. And so for me, it's like normal. It's normal for me to have, spirits in the house or to have kind of what I call paranormal life. And for the longest time, I thought everybody kind of had that. And it took me a while to understand that's not true. So for me, it's normal to have it. And that's probably some of it. And I also want to face what it is, because whatever it is, I want, and I said that in the episode, like I feel empowered when I can face what has been in my life since I was 9 years old. Um, I think it's an empowering feeling to be able to face whatever this is. Because if it is something negative, I want to call it out. And,
Yeah.
I'm not going to allow you in anymore. So that's part of it too.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Got to face those fears.
Yeah, you really do.
Yeah.
I think even the dark stuff, people will say, well, why do you want to learn about the occult or the darker side of things? Well, knowledge is power. And I feel like we have to study and know what all of it is, good, bad, or otherwise. And until we have that knowledge, we can't understand it, let alone deal with it. So that's why I think I want to face it. And if whatever the answers are, if it is all black access military, then yeah, I have some anger about that because it's affected my whole life and my mother's and my sisters and numerous hundreds of others peoples around the country that they have messed with. And that is a whole other side of anger. Like, okay, and whatever the answers are, at least I'm trying to find them, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, speaking of the military, I mean, there was a new film that's recently come out, and that they talked about um, people who've been harmed uh, by their proximity to UAPs and UFOs, and it's got something to do with a some sort of energy field that surrounds these things. It's been some of my observations that I'll tell you this: when I first started out cryptid hunting, I thought that Bigfoot was just a wood ape, and over the years, I've seen evidence that it drastically changes my mind. And now I think that Bigfoot's some sort of interdimensional being. So, and to be able to come into our world, I think they have to traverse through portals or whatnot. But long story short, I think these cryptids that have this ability can also have this same sort of energy field around them, and perhaps close proximity, like what happened to you. Maybe someone touched you, and that's where that radiation burn come from.
Yeah, that's funny you say that because I just had my blue jeans on and there's barbed wire fence. So it's blizzard, blizzard, blizzard. And I was leading. So the film crew and everybody, they were all behind me. So I'm leading the way. Doo, doo, doo. And I tripped forward over the barbed wire into the snow. And I thought maybe whatever that was just trying to help. Again, that kind of speaks to putting a negative spin on the black shadow people just because they're black and shadowy may not mean they're necessarily negative, and maybe
Right.
that radiation burn was somebody going, "Oh, that poor woman, let me help her up."
Trying to help you up.
I mean, I
Mhm.
don't know, but what's interesting too, looking at, so I've done, a lot of research through the years, FOIA requests, what the military knows, and through a lot of the documents that I found from the investigation back in the day, it clearly states. First of all, it states that we had soldiers from Camp Carson on the ranch. It also states that the police officer back in the day, Bill Waugh, and also George Yarnell, the sheriff of Elbert County, they were working with NORAD and the Air Force Academy. And there's documents stating that the Air Force head knows of Bigfoot or Sasquatch. And even if you talk to military men and women today that are at the Air Force Academy, they still will have, I call them Sasquatch sightings along outside the base in the wooded area. And then I kind of printed out. So this was our cryptid that was seen back in the 70s. Okay. Kind of sparse hair. Some of them were gray-haired creatures. Okay. But I got this interesting document from Bob Sala about Malmstrom. I don't know if you guys can see this. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
this one is Elbert County, and this one is Malmstrom. Very similar. And this one was drawn. This where let me put on my glasses because it's really important. I think that you guys know this. It says, um, there was a special team strictly funded by the Department of Agriculture, the purpose of which was to determine the cause of many cattle mutilations, UFO sightings, and Bigfoot reports. He was asked many times to take polygraph tests to airmen stationed at Malmstrom who had seen UFOs and Bigfoot. This letter, she states, I'm an artist, and in 1977, I was called to draw a picture of the Bigfoot. This is confirmation to your story. And so these creatures were very much known by our military. And Malmstrom's where the nukes were shut down as well. So I'm with you, Greg. I know through documents that, our military industrial complex has known about Bigfoot.
Oh yeah.
I think they know what he is, where he comes from, who he's attached to. And it's interesting because Bigfoot was a topic, or cryptids in general. Bigfoot's not the only cryptid out there. We have these large birds and these platypus creatures as well. But it was a topic I just kind of left over there. I'm like, let somebody else deal with the cryptids. I don't know about that. But then you read books like Silent Invasion, and he talks specifically about high-strangeness locations, Bigfoot, and UFOs. And it's interesting because my sister out on Elbert County Ranch, she went to the high school prom. After prom, they go back to the ranch. And she, for pretty much her whole life, would tell you matter of factly that the cryptids, or the Bigfoot, Sasquatch that was seen at the Elbert County Ranch, were directly connected to the UFO and orbs and craft and the cattle mutilations. And they possibly could be like bodyguards or workers, or maybe they're the ETs themselves. I don't know. But if you think about that, with all the animal mutilations, the horse and the cows and that, they would need a big, strong.
Mm-hmm.
And I always kind of thought maybe the animal mutilations and the Bigfoot are somehow connected. And I don't think a lot of people are making those connections, but it would make an awful lot of sense to me. You know?
Yeah. Yeah. We often have conversations on how everything overlaps.
Oh,
You have
yeah.
your cryptids, your paranormal, your UFOs, and of course, you see the orbs and portals opening up, how they're all overlapping and related. And, to Melissa's point, we did have this major event happen just a couple of weeks ago where we saw something that's very similar to that.
Yeah.
So, have you seen, and what cryptids have you seen on these ranches where all this high strangeness has occurred?
Yeah, I did get to experience and see something that I believe was a cryptid, and it was this platypus creature. And it sounds nuts, I know, but I was out there driving around with my son and daughter, and we were just driving around the dirt roads of Elbert County, very near where the ranch is, and this creature just. doo, 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 doo. And I stopped the Jeep right away. I'm like, what was that? Was it a beaver? Was it a what? But it had a platypus bill. And I jumped out and we're looking down in the brush trying to, and I couldn't find it again. We immediately got home, got on the computer, Colorado creatures, da da da. What did we just see? So it was me and my daughter and my son that saw it. So all three of us saw it. And I didn't really know that that was a thing that was reported out there. But in the briefing document, there's a platypus creature. And then when we just recently reopened the Snippy the horse case, I come to find out that Nellie Lewis had seen a platypus creature at Lake Como in the San Luis Valley as a cryptid. I'm like, whoa, what? Because platypus are native to Australia. And then recently, too, Greg, who owns the ranch now, there's a pond on the ranch property near the landing site, and these strange creatures were all dead outside of the pond that are not native to the land. I don't know if they're dormant underground or coming up through caves or caverns. And then also talking to James Keenan just recently on my podcast, The Trifecta, we was talking about Blind Frog Ranch, and he said there was a track of a serpent, a large serpent, which would mean there has to be something underground in Utah at Blind Frog,
Mhm.
where these reptiles could survive through the winters, and
Right.
so he has the big cryptids leaving tracks, these huge snakes. So that's kind of my thought. I think that there's something underground there, perhaps, where these cryptids are coming in and out of.
I have a question about this from a holistic point of view, Kate, and it's
Mhm.
this. So you've talked about cryptids, we've talked about your personal injury, we've talked about these shadow creatures. There's other strange phenomena, many things I know. But is there a single entity behind it? Is there an agenda by some sort of being or beings behind it? Or is it simply a place that they are attracted to in the same way that I'm attracted to cheap drinks in a bar?
Yeah.
Is it, and I'm not trying to be flippant, but just that analogy, we go for things we like, or is there something behind it?
Yeah, I think it's both. So people have asked me, have you encountered ET entities, or what is it that we're dealing with here? And a lot of people don't know, but for season 1, they brought in David Morehouse, and they conducted the biggest remote view project in the history of our country on the Elbert County Ranch. Over 70 remote viewers from several different countries. They actually made a 7-minute bonus clip. If you type it on YouTube now, you can find that bonus clip of the remote viewing of the Rocky Mountain Ranch. And that's kind of what a lot of these remote viewers found, that this is like the super highway of different entities and cryptids going in and out. But what's fascinating, in the original APRA reports, they were said to have 2 types of ETs that were basically in conflict with one another. One type were the blonde, blue-eyed Nordics.
Mm,
Okay.
Mhm.
The other types, this is the original drawing from back in the day from the original case file. These guys. Okay, very unusual,
what are
very
they?
wrinkled. Yeah, Paul Giamatti named them the Tuby guys. But
Okay.
if you ask me what blew my mind about this, so I received these original drawings from the original files years ago, And he was so unusual looking. It's not your typical gray or reptilian or whatever. So I didn't share it anywhere. I didn't put it out anywhere. Fast forward a couple years, we invited a gentleman by the name of Sean Bartok, who wrote a book about all his experiences on a ranch in Colorado. Turns out his ranch property was 14 miles away from the ranch of my childhood. I'm sitting there watching his presentation, and he shares this photo, this one right here.
Wow.
And these tubes come out. So this was his second photo right here. So two complete strangers didn't know of each other. That was his second photo with the tubes out of his neck.
Mm-hmm.
These are them side by side.
Wow.
14 miles away, wrinkled, heavy brow, same eye size, same tubes. And what's interesting about this is these Tuby ET creatures, it said they were in conflict with the Nordics. And I feel like maybe this is just me, I don't know, but I feel like Tuby guys maybe had something to do with these strange boxes that we're seeing there and elsewhere in other cases, and still are being cited. And I think they're more like AI, and where the Nordics weren't. And I feel that might be some of what the conflict is about. Maybe there is beings out there in the universe that are curious about how we're going to progress with AI, with artificial intelligence, where we're headed that way. And maybe that's what this is about. I don't know. And on top of that, if there was a note in the files that if you went up on the hills, say behind the ranch house, and you pretended like you were working with like wires or metal, or you put silver or turquoise, the activity would amp up, and these creatures, including the Bigfoot creatures, would come out like they were curious, like kind of baiting, like we bait the Bigfoot.
Wow. Those drawings are just uncanny. I really think there's something to that. Being that, I don't know, maybe there's a particular race of aliens that frequent that particular spot or in that particular area. Um, However, I know that you live in Colorado or used to live in Colorado, um, or maybe you still are. And I would be remiss if I didn't ask you, have you ever had a Bigfoot experience there?
I had 8 acres, and well, actually at that time I had 2 acres with a little cabin right by the Sasquatch Museum in Bailey, Colorado. Have you guys been there?
No.
I haven't, no.
Jim Myers owns it, and we had just put a big fountain in the backyard, so it was like this water feature. And I was just sitting out there waiting for my ex-husband now and my daughter to come up, and it smelled like a dead body. I heard a tree knock in the front.
Oh,
It was
wow.
dusk time. I just put that water feature in my swing chair, and it was like the worst smell I've ever smelled. And it freaked me out because of the tree knock. So I went in the house and waited for them, and the smell like was transient. The next day I went out and looked for hair and like big footprints and stuff. Didn't find any, but I'm pretty sure that wasn't a bear. I'm pretty sure that was Bigfoot. And I
No,
think
yeah.
it's a really active area out there in Bailey, and I'm thinking he was probably curious, or he or she was curious about the water feature. I think it was just like, what did they put up there? I get a drink now, or something like that.
Well, they're
That was my
very
one
curious.
Bigfoot encounter.
Yeah, your email suggests that you might be an author. So,
Yeah,
what
I
kind of
am.
book,
I
what
wrote a
books do
book.
you have, and where can they find them?
Yeah, my very first book was like just came to me in a lucid dream. Actually, I went to the National Heritage Center in Laramie, Wyoming, to research the Rocky Mountain Ranch, and I got lost in Dr. Leo Sprinkle's lifetime. 40 years of work in the field as a hypnotherapist and a psychologist. And so I would go, maybe it was to escape. I raised 5 kids, so it was like quiet time for me to go to the archives. My kids were teenagers then, so maybe Natalie can relate. But
Yeah.
I would go to the archives and just dig. And and so I found these letters interesting, and I put them in a book called Letters of Love and Light. And basically what it is, I spent 3 years reading people's letters from all around the world. I would bring them home and kind of pull out the juicy parts, like ET descriptions, UFO descriptions, dreams or memories. So many people talked about this dream was like the most vivid dream I had. Was it an actual, you know, abduction encounter, or was this something else? So things like that. Even a chapter of letters from children. Kids would
Wow.
write Leo, and that was cool. So that's my first book.
This has just been an honor to have you here, to talk to you, to hear the stories, to learn more about you. And I want to thank you personally.
Oh,
Thank you so much.
thank you guys so much. You know,
Yes.
it's what it's about, is to share everything, and we're all just trying to figure out the same crazy puzzle, you know, find the pieces and the clues, and that's what I love about being able to do this now, where we couldn't do this, you know, years ago.
Right. Yeah.
Wonderful.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Katie. Thank you
Yeah,
very much.
thank you.
Yes,
Yeah,
thank you. It's so
We
great to meet you.
appreciate it a whole lot.
Nice meeting
Thank
you.
you.
All right, have a good night.
You too. Thank you.
Bye.
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 All I can say is, wow, Katie Paige. What a fantastic guest. Thank you for watching Beyond the Ordinary tonight, and stay tuned for another fantastic show next week.
Get my good side, bitch.